Now, this might surprise you, but testing on animals has been happening for a very long time. In fact, there's evidence that in ancient Greece, physician scientists performed experiments on living animals as far back as 300 BC. Well, of course, since then, animals have been used for science, medicine, for war research, beauty products. Dr. Pandora Pound has spent years opening up the debate on animal experiments. Pandora is based here in Somerset. She's a research director at Safer Medicines Trust, and she's just released a new book that looks at her own experiences and also consults with experts looking at how technology could be used in experiments instead of animals. The book is called Rat Trap, and Pandora is here. Good morning.
Good morning, Simon.
How nice to meet you, and what an interesting conversation to start up, because animal testing is one of those things that has been around throughout all of my lifetime, and I'm old enough to remember the shocking stories about the smoking beagles. I can remember seeing, horrific pictures of animals being used in the cosmetic industry and thinking, well, no, that's terrible, as many people would have. But then when it comes to science, when it comes to medical advances, it's kind of almost as though it's the accepted thing to do.
Yes, yes, you're right. Animal testing was in the news a lot. A decade or so ago, less so now, but always the focus has been on, the harms that animals suffer, which of course is, a legitimate concern. But what I'm interested in, what we're interested in at Safer Medicines, is also how animal testing affects humans. And so by that I mean, does animal research actually translate reliably to humans? Does it benefit humans? Is it able to ensure the safety of new medicines? So these are the sort of things that I'm looking at, and really arguing that it's not just animals that suffer as a result of animal research, but for all sorts of reasons, humans are actually suffering too.
It's really interesting because when I was reading the book, and again, it sort of opened my eyes to something that I perhaps just hadn't really thought about. As I say, I take for granted that there's going to be a science story where they're going to say experiments in rats have revealed this and they've shown that and mice have done this. And you kind of think, oh, well, that's progress. That sort of makes sense to me. But even back as far as 1876, there was a Cruelty to Animals Act that was focusing on animal experimentations. When did they start to become the thing that seemed normal?
Well, really, as you say, it sort of started in the late 19th century, but in the 20th century, definitely with the two world wars, that created a lot more demand for animal research because of experiments on radiation and so on. And then there was the rise of big national institutes of medical research, and it sort of just all began to grow. The rise of the pharmaceutical industry, and then of course all the businesses get involved. So businesses involved with breeding animals, with supplying cages and equipment for animal research, and so it's become a really big industry, and it's kind of now really embedded in our culture and in our institutions. And so there is this kind of as you say, you grew up with it, I grew up with it, and there is a sort of cultural belief that it works. But what I became interested in was really, and this was really when I was working in medical schools for quite a large part of my career, and in one of the schools, my office was based quite near to one of the animal labs. And so I did very rarely see animals being brought in or out, and it just started making me think about, the justification for using animals is always that it benefits humans. And I went looking for the evidence that it does, and I didn't really, along with colleagues, obviously, we didn't really find much evidence, much good, robust evidence that it does benefit humans.
And also, you describe it in the book as being it's sort of very sort of cloak and dagger. It's the secret bit of the laboratory. That's where the animal experiments are. It's the closed doors. Nobody goes in, which again adds an air of, is this the right thing to be doing?
I mean, there are all sorts of reasons why it was and still is a bit cloak and dagger, but I mean, there are attempts to try and make things a bit more transparent. But really, it comes back to the issue of, is it working? Are our resources wisely spent in animal research? If you look at, our most common diseases, like stroke or Alzheimer's or many cancers, I mean, we all know people, and we've all got people in our families or friends who've been affected by these diseases, and yet there's really very little we can do if someone has a stroke or has Alzheimer's. There's very little safe and effective treatments available. And you would think after decades of animal research and all this funding that we would have come up with something better. But unfortunately, we haven't. There's huge unmet need. Um, and we've just got used to, I think, we're having very low expectations of what medicine can deliver, which is a real shame.
Um,
And I so sorry, go on.
Well, I was just going to say, with animal testing, there are issues of, obviously there is the how fair it is on the animal.
Mm.
The other issue is, and you bring this up in the book, and again, it's one of those things that I hadn't really thought of, is that the plumbing of a rat or a mouse may be similar to ours in that you've got the organs and they're all arranged in a similar sort of way, and they are all going to respond in a similar kind of way, but every single human being is different. So what works on one human being is not necessarily going to work on another human being. So therefore, if you are testing on animals, then you are possibly not going to get the results that you would get from a human. And the animals that are being tested on are, as you mentioned, they are grown to be tested on. That's like a whole industry in itself. So these are they're almost pure breeds, which again means there is a bias towards what research is going to find, what medical, what scientific discoveries you're going to make, because nothing is as straightforward as someone who has maybe drunk a bit too much in their life, maybe they've smoked a bit too much, they've not exercised enough, and if they are faced with a medical condition, then their treatment is not going to be the same as for somebody else.
Yeah, you've absolutely got it. Absolutely. So the first thing is that, if you want to develop treatments for humans, you should study humans, not animals, because as you say, you know, animals, they may appear the same as humans in many ways, but even very small, tiny differences can have huge effects in terms of how a drug, for instance, is metabolized. And so this introduces real sort of uncertainty when you're developing medicines, because if something works in a rat, if say you're testing a medicine on a rat and the rat sort of seems to not suffer any adverse effects, this doesn't mean that if you then test it in a human, the human similarly won't suffer any adverse effects, because we're different, and even small differences can have really big effects. And we know that because of some tragedies that have happened when drugs are first tested on humans. And also you say, the fact that animals are bred, they're very similar to each other, and yet humans, we've got this huge diverse population, and it's just there's so much uncertainty when you're trying to translate from these sort of very homogeneous animal samples to a diverse human population. Yeah, absolutely right.
So how do you look to the future then? Obviously, we are in a very brilliant scientific age in terms of computers and the way that computer modelling can be used. Is that one of the steps forward, do you think?
Absolutely, yes. The things that we can do now with computer modeling and artificial intelligence is absolutely amazing. So, you can build models using data that we already have about human biology, and this can be used to sort of predict the reactions of drugs. And, the fact is that these methods are really quick. You can get results in, minutes or seconds rather than the years it would take to do animal studies. And of course, they're so much cheaper and they're more ethical. But in addition to, these computer modeling approaches, you've got some really fancy approaches that are based on human biology. So something called an organ on a chip, which is this fantastic tiny chip about the size of a computer memory stick. Um, and it contains microscopic hollow channels, and you can actually line these with cells from a human organ, say a liver organ, the liver, and then you can pump air and nutrients and blood through these channels so that the human cells are in an environment like the human body. And then if you introduce a drug, you can then look at the way that the cell reacts. And the methods like this have been so successful in sort of detecting toxicity that animal studies haven't been able to detect. They far outperform animal studies, and they're just really elegant technology that we can use now.
One of the things in the book as well is about a new way of treating cancer patients that has been pioneered up at the Christie Centre in Manchester that hopefully will be kind of rolled out elsewhere, where you treat cancer patients based on their tumours.
Yes, so this is like personalized medicine, which is another part of all this. So this is not just studying humans, developing treatments for humans by studying humans, but actually studying particular humans. So as you say, you can look at their particular tumor, um, and then test medicines to see whether they will, that medicine will be suitable for them. So there's such a range now of approaches that we can use that don't involve animals, and these are so much more ethical, so much more precise, because they're directly relevant to humans who can miss out the middle mouse, and we're going to get much more direct and reliable answers.
What do you reckon the time frame is before this becomes the accepted norm? Obviously, the book is part of the conversation, just to keep reminding us that there are alternatives, there is a future that we can look to. The scientific community, there will be a lot of industries that have done what they've done forever and will continue to do what they do forever. The costs involved, talking about that cancer treatment, it genuinely doesn't sound like a cheap thing to do when you're working on individuals. So how do you see the future panning out, and how quickly can a change like this come, do you think?
Well, I mean, you mentioned that there are these sort of entrenched sort of interests, and that is a bit of a problem. I mean, but if you look at places like the Netherlands and America, even, they've actually developed deadlines. For example, the US Environmental Protection Agency is aiming to eliminate the use of mammals in all safety testing by 2035. So it's really good to have a date that you can work towards. And the Netherlands were trying to do this by 2025. Now, the reason the Netherlands had to actually abandon that is because there are some really strong organisations that are trying to resist this transition, and that's partly what we're up against. It's not just the institutional sort of inertia. There are actually organisations trying to resist this because they don't want to move away from animal research. So there's a few barriers to overcome. And I think the sooner that we get, the government to take a lead on this, the sooner it will happen. Because, although there are lots of sort of initiatives taking place, we do need a lead from government and support. So yeah, the short answer is it depends really.
Before I let you go, you have to let me sort of get down to your title, Research Director at the Safer Medicines Trust. I guess this as a job sort of brings you into contact with so many people who are doing so many amazing things that would have sparked your interest in the job that you do now.
Yeah, I mean, I started, my interest really began when I was working, as I say, near this animal lab, and I just really wanted to know what the evidence was. And so that was working with epidemiologists who look at evidence in a really robust way. But yes, there are so many other people that are involved in this effort to try and move away from animal research. Just lots of different organisations and individuals. And yeah, as you say, I've been really privileged to meet and work alongside them. There are charities in the UK like Animal Free Research UK that do similar stuff to us at Safer Medicines. And yes, you can find out more about those. And certainly, if you want to find out more about Safer Medicines, go to safermedicines.org. And yeah, and read the book, because I think we really need to spread the word about this. It is time to change.
Well, there were so many things in the book that it just hadn't even crossed my mind, hadn't even thought of. So good luck with getting the conversation going. And thank you so much for your time today. That's Dr. Pandora Pound talking about the debate on animal experiments. And you can read in her book, The Rat Trap, all about the people that she's met, the fantastic, pioneering scientists that are looking to the future. Pandora, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks, Simon.